I was very pleased today to be joined by Clare Melford, who is the CEO and co-founder of the Global Disinformation Index. You've been denied a visa by the State Department to visit the United States, and you've been labelled a radical activist by the Trump administration. So Ted, tell us then how you became aware that GDI and you personally were going to be targeted, and if effectively you now can't go to America, can you?
No, I can't. So it was December the 23rd last year. I was about to peel vegetables and wrap presents like a lot of the Western world. And I got a message, email from the visa system, the ESTA system, visa waiver system in the US, saying the status of my visa had changed. I needed to go to the US in January. So I had a visa from October, or a visa waiver approved. I looked on the website, it said it had changed from approved to pending. And at that point, my phone lit up with lots and lots of messages because Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, had made an announcement saying that the US government were going to take or were going to reject the visas of several Europeans. There was a lot of speculation as to who. We knew there were going to be 5. There was a lot of speculation as to who it would be. People were asking me, is it going to be you? Is it going to be you? I obviously didn't think it would be. But then a few minutes later, the Undersecretary of State, Sarah Rogers, came out and tweeted that with the names of the 5 people. So that was how I found out. Then the next day, on December the 24th, I had a final email from the ESTA system saying my visa waiver had been rejected. That's how I found out.
Now, your co-founder is actually in New York.
He is.
So what's he doing, and how has this more broadly affected the organisation?
It's been really an extraordinary journey for an organisation that we largely set up to help deal with Russian disinformation. We are now facing a situation where the level of threat, both to the organisation but to us as people, is quite extreme. We've had death threats, rape threats, threats to our children, all of the things that anyone who has found themselves in the crosshairs of the troll armies online faces. For me, it's it's not a physical safety concern because I'm fortunate enough to live in the UK and we don't have guns on the street. But for my co-founder, who I won't name, he's on the website, but I won't disclose his location, it is a significant safety threat. So we now have to do things like have additional security measures on his house, ballistic glass, special other security measures because of the level of threat. And that's wearing. That's not why we started this organisation.
And you've had to introduce significant cuts as well.
Yes, we the very coordinated campaign to go after our funders, not just GDI's funders, but all the organisations in the space, have seen an absolute colossal retrenchment from philanthropy in funding this work. I get it. It's dangerous work. Why would you fund something which might bring you into the crosshairs of a angry mob? So there has been,
and the federal government,
and now the federal government. So there have been a lot of cuts, and unfortunately, GDI is now significantly smaller than we used to be. We still have a handful of very supportive, strong donors, and we're very fortunate to have excellent legal support. And we have had, since the visa bans, we've had a huge outpouring of political support. We had immediately all the 5 people who received the declines in their visa have seen messages from Emmanuel Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, Henna Virkkunen, very strong statements calling on the US government to reverse these visa bans. But it it does take a toll on an organisation, and it takes a toll on the individuals.
How has the British government been?
Quieter than the Europeans. They did issue a statement on December the 23rd or the 24th when the announcements were made. I would have liked to have been stronger, but there are obviously trade talks going on between the UK and the US, which are delicate, and there is a big geopolitical tension right now between Europe and the US, which causes some to be more cautious.
Explain how that's working out in Europe, because there was a sense a few months ago that Trump was saying, if you dare lay a finger on any of my big American companies, you'll pay the price in tariffs. But the Europeans seem to have recovered a bit of backbone, and the DSA is going ahead. Do you sense that they've now recovered equilibrium?
So what I have observed, as I think many others have observed, is there's been a very big change since the threats to Greenland. Before then, there was a sense that yes, there had been many strong attacks on Europe's digital sovereignty and full-throated attacks on the Digital Services Act, Europe's flagship technology regulation. But Greenland was an attack on the territorial sovereignty of Europe, and that, I think, seems to have changed the game significantly. So I think there is a different mood, and there is great willingness, I think, in Europe to enforce their own digital rules and protect their own information environment.
So we've got this far in the podcast without even talking about AI. So AI is
my question, but there we are.
AI is going to create an environment where hundreds of millions of bits of content a day are going to be released without anybody being able to tell the veracity or the authenticity of the content. Just describe the vista that opens up.
Yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it? So I think what happened in the last 20 years when the ability to make the barriers to entry to make, for example, news content just crumbled. You no longer need printing presses, distribution networks. Anyone can make content. That has ushered in a huge amount of human-generated content. Now we don't even need that. The computers can make as much content as they possibly want. So there is one version of the future which is pretty hellish. Who's going to know what's made by a human and what's not? But ultimately, there is still only one real business model for any of these companies, which is monetizing attention. And the best way, or the only way really we have come up with for consumer products, is to monetize attention via advertising. And if you are going to pay back any of the billions of dollars that are being invested in AI right now, ultimately you will have to monetize that attention that you're gaining through advertising. And therefore, these generative AI companies will face all the same challenges that other media companies have faced over the years, which is creating content that meets the user need, but also is suitable for advertisers to place their brands next to. So that gives, again, advertisers, I think, quite a degree of control, and it should give publishers, if they can act together, quite a degree of control. What we're seeing at the moment is publishers not being paid in a consistent way, either for their content being used in the training of these models or in the inference layer, or when their content is being scraped to give answers. And that's the part that we have to fix, and soon, or you will end up in a situation of model collapse. You'll end up where there won't be any incentives to create quality content in the first place. So the business model of AI is still very, very much in flux, but ultimately I think I'm optimistic about it, because it doesn't behove anybody to end up in a world where there is no no quality content to be monetized by advertising.
And now let's turn to the big tech companies, the likes of Meta and Google and X to a degree. What can they really muster the resources to monitor, quotes, harmful, unquotes, content? Is this feasible? I ask because someone like Sir Nick Clegg, who worked at Meta for many years, initially appeared supportive of this, but then kind of threw up his hands and said, actually, it's really too difficult.
Let me add a rider to the question, because I think it's
We had to have a meta rider.
A really important question. But there's also the question of the extent to which these big companies are able to spot AI, the provenance of the material. So if you've got, let's make this up, 250 million pieces of content a day, have they got the technical means not only to decide whether it's harmful, but whether to decide it's, if I can use the word, real? What's your understanding?
My approach to it is to look through the other end of the telescope. So and to go back to the business model, I always ask, cui bono, who benefits? The way the technology companies, whether they are social media companies or generative AI companies, eventually benefit is by selling advertising and by keeping us there long enough to show us the advertising. Therefore, their systems are designed to select the piece of content to show us next, which is most engaging. I don't think they have to make a decision. I don't think they have to be able to identify every single piece of harmful content. They just have to have incentives to not necessarily promote harmful content just because it is the most engaging. So my ideal world would see a rule where any company using an engagement-based algorithm, for example, had to ingest a third-party quality signal or multiple third-party quality signals as one of the factors that they use in their algorithm.
Can you talk about why all this matters? I mean, what happens to societies when disinformation runs rife and it's like a sort of free market of information, and no one really knows who or what to believe any longer?
I think we get thrown back to the Middle Ages. I think the three greatest advances that the human race has made in the last several hundred years are democracy, science, and human rights. And when you exist in an information ecosystem where you are being pushed narratives that are solely pushed to divide you because it profits somebody, either the content creator or the platform that's pushing it, then support for democracy, science, and human rights ends up eroding. And I think what we see across the world right now is a fracturing of that belief that those three things have delivered huge prosperity. And
so you want to go back to an age of gatekeepers?
No, I want to go back to, because I think there are definitely problems with what people rather disparagingly called legacy media. But
you're looking at two here, even though we're doing multimedia, Claire.
Two better examples of legacy media would be hard to find. But there were standards. Legacy media has standards, and those were incredibly important. What we've lost in the democratization of the creation of media is the necessity for standards and the enforcement of those standards. So what I think is a critical missing piece, or what we have tried to do at GDI, is provide an independent assessment to enable, to break that automatic link between, if I can trigger the strongest emotion in you, that's what I'm going to do, because that's how I'll make the most money.
Where does public service media come into this? How important do you think organisations like the BBC are?
Hugely important. I think you only have to live or work or travel outside the UK to see how other countries envy organisations like the BBC with all its challenges. It's incredibly rare to have I know the BBC would say they're not well-resourced, but a well-resourced broadcaster that has such incredible ethos baked into everything, all the types of programming that it does. Yes, there are issues. Of course, there are issues. But when you lose that, you lose when you purely have a commercial media market. I think it's very easy to be at the mercy of the laws governing media ownership or corporate governance. And unless those laws are very, very carefully calibrated and reviewed regularly, you can get situations of concentration of media power, which distort things. You can get too much lobbying of governments to reduce regulations. You can end up in a very unhealthy situation.
So from your point of view, it's a matter of national security as much as anything else. I mean, do you hear that from sort of in your sources in that world, that the area that you're working in is adjacent to the area that they're working in?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of overlap because in disinformation research and technology regulation research, because the engagement-based algorithm world that we live in is great if you're trying to peddle your anti-vax theories in order to sell supplements. It works just as well if you're a foreign hostile government trying to undermine support for a democratically elected government. So hostile actors, the Russians were really the expert in developing the disinformation campaign techniques that are being used by all around the world now. And so there is a huge overlap between defense, cybersecurity and disinformation research. And that's one of the reasons why the chilling of funding to disinformation research, I think, is such a dangerous situation.
So you've had an incredibly tough 18 months of it. Are you clinging on for the midterms and hoping that the political environment in the United States will change at the end of this year?
I like to think we're doing more than clinging on. I think for GDI, we have some very supportive funders still, and we are focusing now on broadening out our work so that we are looking not just at the open web, which is where we traditionally looked, but at all types of social media as well, and not just at advertising, where we've traditionally focused, but all the ways that some of that most harmful content is monetized, whether that's crypto or merchandising or donations. There are many ways that the information ecosystem is being gamed by profiteers and propagandists. And it's extremely important that regulators around the world, as they are designing the rules for the next generation of the internet, understand how these business models are being distorted.
Clare Melford, you've managed to antagonize both the Russians and the Americans.
Must be doing something right.
You must be doing something right. You've stolen my line again, Alan. You really got to watch this. He's looking at my notes. But thank you very much for coming on Media Confidential.
Thank you.
This interview was from the latest episode of Media Confidential, a podcast brought to you by Prospect Magazine. To listen to the full episode, click on the link below. And if you want full access to Prospect Magazine, go to prospectmagazine.co.uk.